You're even more handsome than I remember.
I listened to our first records and I'm like, we ripped 7 seconds so hard.
I'll edit it all out to sound a little more pro than that.
And then Dave Grohl played drums on our album. One more bit of information. I think they should legalize pot.
Welcome to the eleventylife podcast.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of eleventylife. I am Matt, and I'm so happy to have you here with us this week. We have an awesome show this weekend. Davey and I sit down with our friend Jeff in a band called SquadFive-O, and what we thought was originally just going to be a short interview of us sort of comparing notes on the music industry and faith and life and where we are now ended up turning into a 3-hour epic that chronicles their band from beginning to breakup to today. The SquadFive-O story is an insanely fun one of how a small glam rock band went from very humble beginnings in Savannah, Georgia, to landing a major record label deal with Capitol, doing an album at the infamous Sound City, and running into a ton of fun and colorful characters along the way. This episode is everything that you have come to love about the eleventylife podcast. And speaking of which, I need to go ahead before we start this episode and give a huge thank you to everybody who is hitting that subscribe button and telling your friends about our podcast. Our community here is continuing to grow. It's continuing to expand and get more fun and diverse. We love being able to hear what you guys think about the shows on Twitter and on Facebook. And thank you to everybody who's writing in these amazingly kind and sweet fan mail letters about the show. I've said it before and I'll say it again. eleventyseven has some of the best fans in the world, and you guys prove it to us over and over again. And man, do we love being able to share this time with you in your car, at home, on your laptop, wherever you're consuming the show. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. Grab some coffee, something to snack on, maybe a yoga mat, and buckle up because this is a fun one. The podcast is super low key, Jeff. It's just kind of really, I don't know if you checked out any of the other episodes. I know we talked on the phone last week, just to kind of get a vibe for what it is and what we do and what we're about.
I checked out a few of them. Really interesting stuff, man. I've enjoyed it so far. I even subscribed. So,
what?
Yeah.
You paying the bill?
Because you know you're going to be on the podcast now. You don't want to miss your own episode.
Can you guys subscribe from a different provider? That'd be great. If you could subscribe from a separate provider also.
Yeah.
More than one?
Yeah.
Wow. I need to get on that then.
Just think about it.
I've been missing the train.
Yeah. I mean, the more subscribers, the better. Right now, we got purple mattresses and stamps.com chomping at the bit to advertise. It's like every podcast ever is like, oh, yeah, let me guess. We're going to hear about stamps.com or some guys who started a razor company. It's like
Harry's, bro.
Yeah. Harry's.
Exactly.
Or Dollar
Harry's,
Shave
man.
Club or... Yeah, anyway.
Things of high quality.
Yeah. A little bit of background on Davey and I. We were fans of Squad growing up. And then when our band eleventyseven got signed, this was probably like 2005 or 6. Yeah, I think we started working on our first label record in 2005. We kind of came on the scene at this time where everybody that we got really stoked about possibly being able to play shows, tour with, was quitting or growing up or having families or whatever. So 5 Iron was out, Squad was out, a whole bunch of like the Tooth and Nail roster or people on the Tooth and Nail roster that we actually gave a shit about. They were all leaving or just kind of moving on to different phases in their life. And then throughout the course of us being in the Christian music industry, we just sort of, got really sour to it. It wasn't awesome for us. Like I think from a human experience perspective, we loved everything that we were experiencing and playing shows and meeting fans and just doing the whole band thing. But it was always overshadowed by these weird sort of spiritual overtones of like, well, if we show up to this, like this church wants us to come play, are they going to want us to like do an altar call? Or we'd have people that were like, hey, why don't you guys lead us in worship? And we're like, yeah, we don't really do that. We don't really know. Like, I don't know if we're spiritually qualified to do that. That's what we would tell people just because we didn't know what to say. Right. We had zero interest in kind of being a part of that. But you sort of like in a band, it's kind of like conflicting interest. It's like, we just want to play our music and have a career as a band, and then you have this entire industry that's like constantly trying to like milk spiritual content out of you, and a lot of times kind of putting you on this spiritual pedestal. Like, well, you're in a Christian band and you're putting out music on a Christian label. There must have been some sort of filtering process, and you guys must have it all figured out or be closer to God somehow. And that was never true. And then we started kind of digging into the story of you guys and kind of got the impression that maybe you had some kind of similar experiences with all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to actually maybe just like start from the beginning, like did you grow up playing in bands? Like what was the moment that you kind of got inspired to pick up an instrument or a microphone?
Well, John and I are twins. So, I mean, been together since conception, I guess, basically.
Yeah, that's how that works, I think.
Since Myrtle Beach is what I got.
That hot tub on spring break.
Bud Light babies.
It's odd. We just did a reunion show with 5 Iron in Atlanta. We actually reenacted our birth.
On stage?
On stage, yeah.
Your mom was present?
She was present the night before.
She was starting the show.
I just remember we both ended up lying on the ground. And then I was like, I got on his shoulders. Like, we were in the womb. I don't know.
You guys were chicken fighting in the womb? That's amazing.
Doesn't make any sense trying to explain it, but it was like performance art. I think the crowd really dug it. Completely sober, by the way.
Oh, that's good.
It just seemed like a logical thing to do. But yeah, so yeah, John and I, we grew up. Our parents, they were a little older when they had us. Well, not extremely old, but into their 30s, and they raised us. Especially my mom raised us on like oldies. Like we grew up listening. I didn't even really know what modern music was probably until I was in middle school, just because we were raised on the whole British invasion era of bands, which is what was popular when my mom was, a teenager. And so raised on like, the Rolling Stones, a little bit of the Beatles, but our family was always more of a Stones family.
There's got to be some Clash in there.
That came later, so it started with like, the British invasion. The Beach Boys were like my favorite band in 5th grade. Oh my
gosh. Preach.
Yeah. And then, and people would just look at me weird. I'm like, yeah, these guys are great. And they're like, what year is this music popular?
So what year was this?
And I didn't know it was weird. I mean, that's just what we were raised on. And then probably about 8th grade is when John and I got super obsessed with all the bands from the British invasion era. That was like 89. And that was kind of like when, it was the 25th anniversary of, like the Beatles first coming to the States. And
right.
So it was all over television and stuff. And we just got super obsessed. We had a religion. We went to Catholic school, oddly enough. We had a religion teacher that I'm not Catholic. I don't remember a whole lot about the Catholic faith.
Were your parents Catholic?
No, it was the cheapest private school. I grew up in East Savannah and the schools were kind of rough there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of the cheapest way for them to kind of keep us out of what they thought were some dangerous school situations. But our Catholic school was cool, especially my middle school. We bussed kids in from the west side, which was even more financially challenged than the east side. And so it was very diverse. It was a really cool experience, actually. But at any rate, we just got super obsessed with like the Kinks and the Rolling Stones and the Who. And we're just like, we want to be in a band. Neither one of us knew how to do anything.
And did you guys just kind of like stumble across those acts, or did your parents play a huge part in that? Or
my mom definitely planted the seed for the love of music. As far as like discovering those bands, that was more just like watching like, I don't know, documentaries about it.
Yeah.
I just remember, this is going to sound weird, like PBS had a whole documentary about the British invasion. Like I said, it was like the 25th anniversary, and we would just watch it over and over. And then our teacher, Miss McBride, who was the religion teacher, she's an old hippie, and she had tons of VHS tapes of just like those bands performing on different shows, and she actually lent those tapes to us, and we just watched them religiously, like over and over.
I thought you were going to say that she would play them in class, and I'm like, that's a great way to kill
Jack
time.
Black.
Yeah.
So
she would have lost half the class on that.
Right. Yeah, she was Jack Black before School of Rock.
Yeah. So yeah. Jeff, were your friends into the same kind of music, or was it just you and your brother?
Just me and John, really. Just me and John. And we had friends, of course, but that's not what we bonded over. We bonded over other things. But John and I were just zealots, man. I mean, neither of us ever picked up an instrument or even had an idea, but we were just fixated on this idea of like being in a band and doing music. And we started high school playing. I love football, college football mainly. I'm a Georgia fan, so it's been a rough year. It was a great year.
It's a great year.
To the last play.
It was a great year, Jeff. Just take the great year. It's fine.
It was great. And so I was playing freshman football, and I remember, and John swears this was him, but I think it was me. And so I don't know if it's this weird twin thing, but I swear I was going across the middle in practice, and Kevin Witkowski, this linebacker, just lit me up. And I just remember being on my back on the field and thinking, I'm too small for this. Probably music. Probably music is a good idea. And so for our birthday that year, our dad took us to like a music store, and John bought this bass. It was like this red bass called the K-K-A-Y, K Starter, had a star and then dash T-E-R bass. And I got like a Fender Squier, like a Stratocaster. Yeah. And then these little tiny amps, these little Fender beginner amps. And
was this like the Squier starter pack? It sounds like the starter pack.
Yeah, it was kind of like that, exactly. And then we just went home and started trying to learn our instruments. And John got really good. Like clearly had like a gift for it. I got good enough to play and sing at the same time, which was not great. And then we met this guy named Juan Doan. Juan as in like Juan, like the Spanish name, but he's full-blooded Vietnamese kid. But his parents named Juan.
The old bait and switch.
Exactly. And Juan shredded, man. Like he was so good. But he was into like Guns N' Roses and Poison and Motley Crue. This was his bands. Yeah. And so he kind of brought us into that thing, and we're like, we're going to play music like this. So we played them all like our British Invasion stuff. And he's like, that's pretty good, but we should play music like this. And then he pressed play on Appetite for Destruction. And, that opening guitar line came in, and we're like, yeah, maybe we are going to play music like this.
What was it about this music that you found attractive or inspiring? Was it resonating with something inside teenage you, or was there something about, like, because Davey and I have talked about this before, and I think there's been a few times where we've landed on this idea that there's something like, as a teenager, you don't feel very powerful, and there's something oftentimes it's empowering about a specific kind of music that you gravitate towards, or you feel like there's some sort of power in that you kind of need to internalize or to be able to control. I didn't know if you'd had like a similar experience or what.
I think when we were younger, it was really just more about like this idea of having like this gang, like this group of people who had like this singular vision.
Yeah.
And just, I really do feel like God kind of he put some type of entertainment gift within me. Like when people ask me, like when I always tell my story about how, I teach high school now, it's just like, yeah, I'm still performing. I do 3 shows a day at 90 minutes a piece, like that's with a captive audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always feel like I have to say, well, what did you do in the band? Well, I was the singer, but I wasn't a great singer. I was a decent singer, but I was a great performer, and I was a great front man. And I could, someone told me one time, you're a really great rallier. Like you can rally people. You could take some situation where no one has direction, and then you rally them towards whatever it is you need to get done. I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's why I was a pretty good front man. It's because I could kind of convince a crowd. So I think it started off as that, just this idea of like, first of all, the music was good. Second of all, like, especially those bands were just cool because they all had an aesthetic. They all looked alike, Right. They all either like rocked the same haircuts, or the Who had like the whole mod thing going for them. Yeah. The Beatles before they got all weird. No offense if you're Beatles fans, but like I love them up until like, I don't know, maybe Rubber Soul, and then it gets kind of Sgt. Pepper's and everything after that gets kind of weird.
Yeah, we're like 40 years past somebody being offended by that.
What'd you say?
We're like 40 years past somebody being offended by what you just said.
You just never know. Some people get real militant about the Beatles. Like, I love
do.
The Fab Four.
No, we're not one of them. I am a huge White Album fan. So you were saying like that now your life looks a little bit different, where yes, you feel like you're playing 3 shows a day and that you're really good at rallying people. This is like, so you just get people so jazzed about male and female pronouns in Spanish, or
well, it's more like I feel like I trick kids into learning. It's like it's like the grammar and that whole aspect of Spanish is like slipped in between really bad jokes and, I don't know, off the wall behavior that I might exhibit in the classroom. Totally professional for the most part, but
I'd love to see what you look like within a teaching situation, because I did something very similar. I actually, up until a few months ago, was also a college professor, and I was teaching music business, and I kind of felt like that too. Like every time I had a class, it felt like a show. The unfortunate side effect of that was I would get so much into the show that would kind of turn into Matt trying out sketch comedy instead of teaching anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that, you as a self-proclaimed excellent performer.
It's definitely, there's a fine line you have to kind of tread, you know, like there'll be times when we finish a class and I'm like, I covered like one thing I needed to cover today.
Yep.
And all these other things took a backseat to this really awesome story about the weekend. That was like hilarious, but probably should have taken like 60 of the 90 minutes to tell. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I think there is definitely kind of that line you kind of tread.
Yeah.
But I feel also like you teach who you are.
Mm.
And like, that's always, I really have a hard time when like they want us to collaborate with other teachers. Right. It's like, what's working in your classroom? And I look at my coworkers who are awesome, but they're 50-something-year-old women. And I'm like, what works in my classroom is not going to work for you because your personality is totally different than mine. Like, and not to mention the fact that I teach mainly Spanish 1s and Spanish 2s, which means I teach a lot of freshmen. And teaching freshmen is entirely different than teaching juniors or seniors.
That's
like
true.
Juniors to seniors will sit still for a bit and listen to you. But freshmen, you kind of have to like, you know, you have to make it exciting.
Yeah.
You have to make it fun, or otherwise they're just going to check out. And not all of them are going to love Spanish. So I always feel like my job is to kind of figure out which ones have like are predisposed to being bilingual or predisposed to really loving language acquisition.
Yeah.
And like build them up in a way that maybe I can't, not that I don't want to, but I can't build up the other kids because it's just not their thing. They're trying to get through it. Like I tried to get through chemistry.
Yeah.
I had to get through chemistry. I didn't love it.
Man,
I was
you and me both, dude. I hated chemistry. I thought the idea of chemistry was pretty amazing, but because I was like into alchemy and stuff in high school,
you're into
I was like, wow,
chemistry.
this could be pretty cool.
Like you liked Harry Potter, you didn't like chemistry.
Nicholas Flamel did this sort of. Yeah.
Chemistry sucked because it wasn't to the last day when we actually did awesome stuff. Like the last day he took us in the lab and started making things explode and like shoot foam up to the ceiling and all this awesome stuff. I'm like, where was this all year?
Do you think there's an analogy between like a high school class, a class of freshmen, and the way you have to behave to get their attention, and a class of seniors, and like a room full of young youth group kids, and maybe a room full of old dudes in leather jackets, and the way you have to behave to get them
Wait, are
into
you
it
asking
separately?
if there's a difference? There's a difference in how you respond to the crowd?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that like you are a performer, right? And you sort of cut your teeth on stage, and then you moved into this role of high school teacher. It seems really seamlessly like you sort of draw from the same talents that you were drawing from when you were on stage to do this high school thing. So I was just wondering like what's the similarities there?
I guess it's just the idea of like, maybe this is going a little deeper than your question wanted to go, but it's like the bands, especially after high school that I got into, like, you know, like the straight edge movement bands like Youth of Today, 7 Seconds, Minor Threat, all these bands that kind of formed my ethos or the way I thought like right out of high school. It was this whole idea of like positively impacting people's lives. But at the same time, it's like, it wasn't so much about the band. It was about everyone together. Like the band kind of seamlessly melded into the crowd.
Right.
And like, if you ever watch like old Minor Threat videos, like there's especially a great one, Minor Threat Live at the 930 Club. It's almost like the band is just part of the chaos. Yeah. They're just like, they disappear. There's so many people on stage, like it kind of disappears and you just track in Ian's little bald head all around the stage. But when Squad was at its best, it was almost like we were on autopilot, And what we were doing was more about the people in the crowd than us on stage.
Right.
And I feel like in the classroom, that's how I've kind of taken that same kind of idea. Is like, I don't want to be like, and this is teacher talk, but it's like the sage on the stage.
Yeah.
Like, I don't expect kids to sit there for 90 minutes and listen to all that I know.
Right.
Like, for it to be successful, I need to be able to feel like I connect with the audience or connect with the crowd. And in order to do that, you know, like, I'll ask them about their weekend, or we'll start with some stupid joke, or I'll say something just insanely stupid to make people laugh. And then I feel like when people laugh, and it's kind of like with Squad too, like when people laugh, it's like everyone's guard is let down.
See, that's so funny that you mentioned that, because I feel like we had a really similar approach in our band, where it's like, I'm kind of an anxious person anyway, so it's like, well, whenever I took the stage, it was like, I need an icebreaker, and the audience is not going to give it to you, so you have to do it for yourself. And it's like, if we can get out on stage and in the first 10 seconds just do the dumbest thing we can think of, like go ahead and get rid of the ego, just be like, we're not cool, here's an uncool thing. Then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, the ice is broken, let's go swimming. And it feels like it's a lot easier to sort of wade into that and have fun with it. Yeah. And become part of the crowd, like become part of a shared experience.
Yeah, you're sort of abandoning that idea of like, we are on stage, we are what you are looking at, we are what you aspire to be.
Yeah, there's something special about us as a band. It's like, no, there's something special about this moment. Let's be a part of it.
We're likely not as cool as you are.
Which is true.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like, kind of like when Squad lost its way, we were trying to be the look at us sort of band, you know? Whereas like when we did these reunion shows lately with 5 Iron, the whole idea was this, like, we know, like, John and I are in our 40s, the other guys are in their 30s. There is no trying to be cool. It's just, you know, let's have fun with this. Let's like reconnect with this crowd, and it's not about look at us, you know, like I would always talk to them. It's like the spirit has to be right. Like the spirit of the band, this idea of like, we're going to have a celebration of these songs and of this band, but in a way that like how this band affected all of our lives, not just the 5 guys in the band, but like all the people in the crowd who are singing these songs that, you know, when you got people coming up to you, you know, that are at your show with their kids. Yeah. You know, it's pretty awesome. It's really flattering that these people would bring their kids and be like, this is the music that changed my life, or this is the band that I would go see when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And cool.
That's amazing, dude. Yeah. So back up a little bit. Like you and your brother start playing, you start hanging out with Korean Juan, and then Vietnamese Juan.
Vietnamese, man.
Sorry.
Vietnamese.
Oh my gosh! Here comes the hate mail.
Juan.
At what point I know that you guys put out like an independent record before you guys were with Tooth and Nail? Tell me about the evolution of going from like playing hometown shows to kind of jumping onto an international platform.
So with Juan and a couple other guys from our high school, which by the way was an all boys Catholic military high school.
Wow.
We really look the part of rock and roll band with our short haircuts.
Right.
We started a little cover band, and we would play a few parties here and there and doing just cover songs. And we covered everything. Like we covered British Invasion, we covered metal songs, I think we even did a Garth Brooks song, but we were just making music.
Garth!
Yeah, we did too.
It's like our favorite. Wait, which Garth song did you cover? It might have been the same one.
It was actually, what's the one he wrote where he didn't write it. It was a cover. It was on his first Rope in the Wind. Wasn't that his big album, like his breakthrough? Shameless.
Oh,
but he didn't write that.
Yeah, we didn't.
That's
cover
awesome.
that.
We actually covered the dance. Yeah.
Good song. Yeah, but I don't think Garth wrote Shameless. I think someone else did, and he just covered it. I can't.
Yeah, it sounds like Garth. Typical Garth.
He wrote it for Trisha. Y'all shut up.
Trisha wrote it for him. That'll blow your mind.
So we did that through high school, and then John and I became Christians right before our junior year. That's like the mark I would mark as the time that I really sort of started taking my faith seriously, or even really understanding what faith is. It's a personal thing that you decide on your own. You're not born into it like you're born into like your race or whatever. It's like something that you actually have to work out on your own. And so that's kind of sort of when that whole aspect of my life started. And then, so for a while, I put music on a hold just because I was kind of like trying to figure out all that. And then I think I went through that phase all Christian kids do, where like when you make that decision to follow Christ and then you throw away all your good music. Yes. And that was like the worst decision ever. then you spend like 2 or 3 years later, you spend like so much money buying it all back.
Yeah.
Well, and looking back at it now, it's like, where were the adults saying, guys, I think this might be a little overkill.
Let's pump the brakes.
Yeah, like where are the reasonable adults when this is happening?
Maybe just put them in like a bin for now, and then later.
Right.
But yeah, at any rate, like, so that kind of like put music on hold for a while. And then I slowly realized, just as like anyone walking through their faith does, it's like music is music, and all the arts are beautiful. And like, are there great painters who are not Christians? Yes. Does that mean I should celebrate their work? No. And so then I just slowly worked my way back into realizing that like music is music. And
so did you actually throw away all of your music, or did you just give it to your sinner friends?
Oh no, I threw it away. We were committed. Man, gosh, I regret that. But
you and your brother both became Christians at the same time?
Yeah, it was a really weird thing. Like, I don't know if it's exactly the same day. I just know
Was your mom there for your second birth?
She was not.
Did you guys sell it as a group package, like a group package to Christ? It's like, hey, you can have us both for the price of one.
Yeah, I'm not. We talk about it all the time, and we always say, "Oh, it's kind of weird that happened," or that I don't want to call it epiphany. It's so much more, like in depth than that. But that kind of happened for both of us, if not the same day, at least the same summer. And
okay, so did you guys grow up in a religious household?
We grew up like my parents. We went to church, but it was like that was pretty much it. I mean, we went to church. For a while, we were raised Episcopal, and then my mom had some problem with the Episcopal Church, like something that a doctrine they adopted or something like that. And so we left the Episcopal Church, and then we didn't go to church for a while, and then we went to an independent Episcopal church, and then we quit going there too. I don't know.
And then
something
after the
else.
Rattlesnake bites got just too much to handle. No, just kidding.
It's just like dodging those snakes, man. So for a while, it just wasn't going to church. And then like every, I guess, conversion story or faith story, it started with a girl. And I was just like, I started dating this girl, and she went to this church out where it's actually where we live now, but it was outside of Savannah. And I started going an extra night a week to this Bible study they were having, just because as an extra night a week, I could see her. And then they hired this youth pastor guy. He wasn't even like a youth pastor. He's just a surfer dude from Florida that was going to school at one of the universities.
That sounds like a youth pastor to me.
Yeah.
Low barrier to entry.
So and they just brought him in, and our youth group was like 10 kids strong or something like that. Yeah. I mean, we were a tiny church, but I mean, he was just really cool and just really down to earth, and he wasn't like over spiritual. He wasn't like he just raised a lot of questions that made me. People talk about people leading people to Christ. This guy just he raised questions that he didn't answer that forced us to wrestle with him.
Right.
And then through just like wrestling with these questions and wrestling with these ideas about like humanity and divinity and the need for a savior. And I guess the way I sum it up now is like, I was actually talking to my son about this the other night. And just the reason that like Christianity makes sense to me, if you were to boil away all denominations and like all the different churches, but like I guess like C.S. Lewis does and breaks it down to like mere Christianity. I guess the reason it makes sense to me is that it's the only faith system that says like we're all the same, or we're all in the same boat, and that none of us can do anything to get ourselves out of that. And so like I can't stand in judgment of anyone, because like Hitler and I are basically, I'm not a Hitler. I didn't kill millions of people, but I've hated people in my heart, and I've known what it's done to me personally. I've never slept around on my wife, but I've certainly, lusted after or had inappropriate thoughts about other women, and I know what it does to my heart. And so it's this idea of like, it's not so much about what the physical consequences are to whatever you do in life. It's what the spiritual thing is. And killing and hating sort of does the same thing to the interior. Of course, if you kill someone or murder someone, you're going to jail. If I hate you, I'm not going to jail. But really, if I hate you, who's it destroying, me or you? So it's kind of what makes sense to me. It's just like, oh, okay, so we're all kind of in this boat, and the only solution, or the solution, is to admit that we can't fix the problem, and to allow the only person who can fix the problem. and I can't worry about being good enough because I'll never be good enough. But the fact that I'll never be good enough shouldn't discourage me from like being kind and being honest and being forthright and being loving. I don't know. It's like a weird thing. I mean, I'm sure you guys know with faith, it's a like my faith is always evolving.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's really weird too, because I feel like my faith, and a lot of my friends don't agree with me, but like I'm pretty socially liberal. Let gay people get married. What's the big deal? Like, let them same-sex union. I'm all for it. Every time it's on the ballot, I vote for it.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Let them marry. Like, I don't see how that's going to affect my life. And people are like, well, it's tearing down the pillar of marriage. I'm like, and The Bachelor's not? And Married at First Sight is not? Like, what do you mean the pillar of marriage? Like society is already torn down.
I really wish the gays would quit trying to get married so we could watch more Bachelor on television.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Or like, it's just like stuff like that. Like, because
The Bachelor's such a pillar of all things, all things moral.
And even in my faith, like, and my friends were arguing, I was like, well, fine. If the idea of Christian marriage is one man and one woman, that's fine. Then let the Christian church hold that as its idea of what marriage is. And I'm fine with that. But why should we impose that on a society that doesn't want to be ruled by that, you know?
Sure.
It's just like, I wouldn't want like the Quran governing America either.
Sure.
Like, I wouldn't want.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I get into that conversation with my parents a lot where I'm like, I know that you guys are Christians in that this is like, that it seems on the surface like it'd be really great to just have Christian values and beliefs and practices and ethics and all of that stuff to be something that maybe is married with the government. I see why that would seem cool for you on the surface
today
to have a Christian government today, but setting the precedent that one group's faith should somehow dictate a government that governs lots of different people of lots of different faiths and backgrounds and socioeconomic statuses. Like that's not necessarily, that doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
Sure. And effectively you're saying that like to anyone who is not a Christian and doesn't abide by our Christian values, that you don't get the same tax breaks that we get.
Right. Or to say like, you're not a Christian, and if you don't subscribe to this faith, then somehow you shouldn't be able to reap the benefits of social structures within the government, of social services within the government. Like,
yeah.
Right.
I feel like it's a slippery slope. Anyway, how do we get onto that? You volunteered a lot of information about this, Jeff. Is it on your mind a lot?
No. Well, I just think that for people who accept Christ or say, I'm now a Christian, and then just quit thinking about these things.
Sure.
It's not doing right. The church, like the church as in the body of Christ, not as in the organization with the tax breaks or whatever. But it's not doing believers any favors, because we don't live in a world that believes like we believe.
Yeah.
I think we live in a world that is cool with Jesus, but maybe just not so cool with like the way the people who follow him behave. But at the same time, I don't try to stand in judgment of people who think like that. I do think that like their thinking is flawed. You know, I'm sure I have plenty of things that are flawed in my thinking. I think about these things because I want to know, if people ask me, how do I reconcile the Christian faith with these different ideas, and I think I can do it. That's why I don't join organizations. Like, it took me we are members of a church, but it took me forever to join the church because I didn't know if I wanted to sign up for membership and something like that, you know? Or even like, I don't belong to a political party. I like to vote my conscience when I vote, and I don't want to say I belong to this party and I follow them regardless of whatever. Like, that's just not how I think. And a lot of that probably has to do with the music that got me into punk rock to begin with. One more bit of information. I think they should legalize pot.
Same, bro.
We're opening the podcast with that. One more bit of information in case I didn't grandpa you guys to death already. They should legalize pot. Your sensei surfer youth pastor teach you that?
No, okay. On a personal thing, like, it's just any type of chemical intake has never really been my bag. Like, I have my own hangups. I have my own demons I battle. I never drank till I was 27 because I wanted to know I was okay with it. And I've never smoked cigarette. I've never done any narcotics. And if they legalize pot, I'm not going to smoke it either. But the thing about that is, and again, a lot of that I think really comes from not even from the Christianity, but from like straight edge. Like, a lot of that's just still kind of in me.
Oh, squeaky clean Fortson over here.
But I just feel like, yeah, legalize it, sell it, tax the crap out of it, use the revenue to do something great. You know, like fix the roads around my house or something. I don't get it. I really do feel like, and plus there's medicinal benefits. Like it's been proven.
Yeah.
So I don't get what the hang up is, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not going to go to a legalize it rally or something.
Sure.
It's just the same thing. It's just like, I don't see what the big deal is. I mean, if alcohol is legal and tobacco is legal, I don't see what the big deal about legalizing marijuana is. And I told my students that, and they're like, so you want to smoke up? Like, no, I'm not. I don't smoke cigarettes now.
14-year-old. I can't smoke with you.
I think that's hard. That's hard because everybody wants decisions to be so black and white. They either want you to be for or against, and I feel like people want to tune out when you're like, hey, what about the grayscale?
Yeah.
There has to be something in between here. So did you share a lot of these same sort of views when the band had first started out and you guys were kind of thrust into did you see yourself as playing Christian music, or did you just kind of see yourself as doing whatever thing you thought was coolest at the time?
Yeah, it definitely, I think when we first started, we thought of it as more of like a ministry, but in the extent of like, none of us, I mean, I don't think if you talk to either of the three of us when we first started, none of us really felt like we were called to be like pastors or something like that. But I think the idea was, though, that the bands that we loved that were outside of the Christian market were so much about a message, you know, right. like I said before, 7 Seconds, Minor Threat, Youth of Today, Gorilla Biscuits, like all these bands, even Op Ivy, which is clearly a SquadFive-O, you know.
I was just telling Davey
who we aspire to be.
Yeah. We were listening to your first record in preparation for the podcast, and I was like, this sounds like super sped up Clash or / Op Ivy.
I listened to our first records, and I'm like, we ripped 7 Seconds so hard. So many 7 Seconds like progressions that I'm like, that's a 7 Seconds song, and we added a ska part to it. It's like, but at any rate, I guess, you know, the great steel or whatever that quote is. But not that we were great.
We did the same thing with like Blink and MXPX, so who cares?
Yeah. So I guess when we started, it was this idea of like, we wanted we were a Christian band or whatever.
Yeah.
But that was also at the inception of Tooth and Nail. Like Tooth and Nail would just come on the scene. They just released their first couple of albums. So it was this exciting idea of like being able to do this music and do it in a genre or in a scene that was about like the Christian message. So yeah, I guess when we first started, it was like this idea of like, we're gonna bring this message of hope, but we're gonna do it in the way that the bands that we love bring the message of like, you know, drug-free youth and positive living and better youth organization and all that stuff. We're, you know, of course, we have this extra caveat to ours, which is like this Christian faith that's also involved in it. So I think that definitely was our goal. I mean, we sent our first demo to Tooth and Nail, and actually got a very nice handwritten letter from Bill Power back in the mail.
Billy.
That they appreciated. Yeah, they appreciated the demo, and they weren't looking at signing any more bands, or I can't remember. We should have kept it and framed it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I think that was definitely our goal. We definitely had our eye on that market, or at least, you know, being from Southeast Georgia, not Southern California, our idea of what that market was.
Right.
You know, it was this idealized Christian alternative music punk scene that we visualized in our heads, which probably truthfully never existed. But, you know, when you're 18, 19 years old, and not that we grew up in the country or anything, but, you know, that didn't exist. And to this day, bands still don't really come, any type of bands really don't come to our hometown. It's just it's a smaller town. To go see a show, we have to go to Jacksonville or Charleston or somewhere that's a little bigger than us.
Yeah. So tell me how that came about. Like, did you guys run into Brandon at a show, or I thought that maybe you guys had put out your first record on a label that was separate from Tooth and Nail.
Yeah. So we, John and I, and our friend of ours named Justin, who was like a surfer kid, because we are on the coast over here. We started this band, and we stumbled on SquadFive-O as the name. We practiced in our bedroom at my parents' house, and we started getting actually pretty good at what we did. And we started playing shows in Jacksonville and Atlanta a lot. There's this just terrific all-age club up in kind of in Marietta, just outside of Atlanta, called the Pterodactyl.
Nice.
It's like an old sports bar that they converted into an all-age club. It's in like an old strip mall with like a thrift store and all kind of cool stuff. But at any rate, we started playing there a lot. We got sent our demo. They said, yeah, we want you to be in the Battle of the Bands. We played that Battle of the Bands. I don't think we won it. But the owners of the club were like, we really like you guys. We want you to play here more. So we started playing there pretty regularly, maybe twice a month on the weekends. And it was like, I guess, a Christian-based club. So they would bring bands like MXPX through and stuff like that. And so we started getting, and Five Iron, we started getting those gigs, like as the local support for those acts. And then the owners of that club decided, hey, we want to start a label just for you guys because we want to put out your music. We're going to start a label.
The owners of Pterodactyl decided to start a label.
Yeah. And so that's what they did. And they had the claim of fame of like, they discovered Third Day, these guys, like back in the day.
What a claim.
And then, yeah. And then ended up selling them whatever rights they had to them to whoever Third Day ended up with.
Jesus Christ.
And then so they said, this time we want to, I guess they wanted to keep all the benefits or the money or the whatever would come in. And so they
did they have like any sort of infrastructure, like distribution and copyright? Okay.
They just started forming this idea. They called it Bulletproof Records.
Okay.
They signed us, and then they signed this other band we used to play with all the time called Spud Gun.
Yep.
Who later became World Against World. And then after that, they started signing, like they signed this band, Dear Ephesus, which is Lewis from Gasoline Heart was like his first band. And so they actually had a little roster of bands. They recorded, or we did our first 2 CDs with them, the 2 punk ska ones with them.
The 2 Operation Ivy ripoff records, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's not forget Suicide Machines.
Right.
Lest we forget.
Right.
Yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
That dude, their first album, Suicide Machine's first album, is a masterpiece. It's probably the best punk ska album ever put together as far as like songs and production.
Yeah.
Anyway, we ended up recording our second album, Fight the System, in Seattle with Aaron Sprinkle. And that's when we kind of met Brandon for the first time.
Were the Pterodactyl guys footing the bill for you guys to record in Seattle?
They were, yeah. So we were in Southern California, and we were supposed to drive to Seattle to record, and our van was acting up. And so we're like, we're not driving up there and going to break down somewhere along the way. We want you guys to fly us up there. They're like, we can't fly you. And then we're not going. They're like, all right, we'll fly you. So they flew us up. So they flew us up to Seattle, and we were there 3 weeks with Aaron Sprinkle in a really cool little reel-to-reel studio. And I swear, the sun was shining the day we landed, and it didn't shine again until the day we left. It was February in Seattle.
That's how you know you're in Seattle.
So, but it was awesome. I mean, we loved it. Yeah. So that was a really fun experience and really, really cool. But that's when we first met Brandon, and we actually went to the Tooth and Nail offices, and I want to say he saw us play maybe a little bit later. We were playing 2 shows with Five Iron and it was Supertones, Five Iron, and the Insiders.
That sounds like 1998 to me.
Yeah. And the Insiders couldn't do 2 of the shows out west, like I think it was the Portland show and the Seattle show. Yeah. So we ended up doing those shows, and that's when Brandon actually saw us play live, and that's when the wheels started turning with Tooth and Nail. Right. Like they started getting really interested. Yeah. In what we were doing.
Yeah, that's cool. So you guys were under contract with the Pterodactyl guys.
Yeah.
How did you, I have to imagine that if their whole MO is kind of signing bands that show a lot of promise, I would venture to say they didn't make it easy for you to leave, but I don't know. I mean, I would just assume that it was probably got a little bit nasty.
Yeah, it did. Like all things in the music industry, typically. We found a loophole. Well, we signed our letter of intent with Bulletproof, but we never signed our contract. So we made 2 albums under a letter of intent. And in the letter of intent, it never mentioned anything about publishing. One of the popular things to do back then for, I guess, independent labels was to actually own part of your publishing.
Yeah, I think have you sign over. That's been the deal since day one with the music industry.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, it didn't mention it in the letter of intent. So they had never paid us what they owed us on our publishing. And so Brandon's lawyers quickly figured that out.
If that's not if that's true, then how are they justified in collecting royalties under your name?
Who knows? We were terrible businessmen as well. But at any rate, Brandon's lawyers figured that out. That's like the frustrating thing, I think, for my wife is that we were never really good at the business end.
Okay.
Like we just wanted to do the music and have fun and connect with the crowd. And meanwhile, like we're not paying the bills and things like that. Yeah. So Brandon's lawyers figured that out, and they're like, he's like, you should sell me that portion of your songwriting. I think it's called Thirsty Moon was his publishing. And we'll go after them for the money, which they wouldn't. They didn't have it. He goes, and if they don't, then they're in violation of contract. And I don't know how all that works because I'm still not a businessman. Through it all, Bulletproof finally caved and said, all right.
It sounds like he swooped in and saw money on the table that belonged to you and said, hey guys, how about I take all this money? Wouldn't that be great? And then everything's fair. But it doesn't necessarily sound like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it looked like on paper, but
he paid us what we should have been paid. And then he went after them for it. So now they owed him the money.
Like he gave you an advance for your publishing?
Yeah, like an advance on our publishing. So then he swooped in and said like, hey, you know, I own this now and you have to pay me. And this is the way I remember it. Now, if you talk to Brandon or Marty, who's the guy that owned Bulletproof, maybe it was different. But as far as my non-business inclined mind remembers, this is pretty much the way it worked, is that you know, Brandon came in, paid us the advance, and then went after them. And then eventually Bulletproof had to make a deal where they ended up selling whatever they could of us to Tooth and Nail.
Jeff, do you remember how much that publishing advance was? Because that would be different from a label advance. It'd be different from like you guys making Bombs Over Broadway and then getting an advance on that album.
I have no idea. I know we sold about 30,000 units of like the first album and almost as many of the second album too. So however much publishing that would have entitled us to. I remember it being a pretty good amount just because we were able to kind of get a van and some other stuff that we needed.
Okay, Jeff, how much? Give us a number.
$8 million.
That's what we thought.
No,
that was what my guess was.
Well, that's how much they gave us.
It was probably somewhere in the neighborhood between, probably somewhere in the neighborhood. I don't even know. Maybe $8,000 to $10,000, maybe.
That sounds in the ballpark of what Christian bands first getting signed normally get with publishing or label advances. Yeah, we got just enough. I got just enough to buy like an amp head, and we got just enough to buy a van too.
The van was the big deal because I think we were renting at the time, which was not cheap.
Well, you guys were squeezing your old record label for plane tickets to make records.
Heck yeah, man! Like we're not driving this van to Seattle. Because if we do, it's not coming back. So that's how SquadFive-O became a Tooth and Nail band. Okay. And then you guys put out your first record with Tooth and Nail, which is Bombs. Yes.
Who did you guys record that with?
That was with Dwayne Barron. He was like an engineer on a few things that we really liked a lot. I mean, he basically worked with a lot of the bigger like metal bands from the late 80s or whatever. And I think at the time we envisioned ourselves kind of moving that way, like moving towards more of like a straight rock sound. And like, I think we always envisioned ourselves as like these gutter glam, kind of like, that's kind of what we wanted our image to be. Like
nailed it.
Glammy, but not pretty.
Right.
Like dirty.
Yeah.
Dirtier than prettier.
Yeah.
You know? And I think with the hair and the dreads and all that, it totally worked out great. The unfortunate thing about that album is just that, well, when he came in, he brought in that mentality, which we adopted because we're like, yeah, that makes sense. But he slowed us down a lot. Like he slowed the tempos way down and different things like that. And I think that made a lot of those songs kind of lose their punk edge.
Okay.
If you ever saw like Bombs Over Broadway or Apocalypse Now or We Rule the Night, like if you see those songs live, it's a totally different energy than there is on that recording.
Faster.
Yeah. And I don't even know if it's the tempo so much. It's just the energy overall. It's like not as polished. It's gritty. It's, it's edgier. But, at the time we were recording, you guys probably know this. It's just like, I don't really listen to anything we recorded. It's just hard to listen back to things you make. And I might once in a while, just for fun, kind of listen to something and be like, oh, it's not as bad as I remember. But a lot of the things you record, you kind of listen back and you're just like, why did we do that? Like, but I can remember the mindset we were in when we did it.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's like a continual process. Were you the primary songwriter, or was it like a group of you guys? Was it you and your brother, or how did that work?
The first two albums, John and I wrote everything. And then when we got to Bombs, it was mainly John and I, and then Adam, because Adam had joined the band by then, had a little bit of input. But then when we got to the self-titled, that was like pretty much all 5 members were writing at that point.
Do you feel like you thrive better in a singular room writing by yourself or in more of like a group collaborative setting?
I think as far as the core idea of a song goes, I do better by myself.
Yeah.
But I think the song is the core that I bring is nowhere near as good as when the other five guys start adding their input to it. You know, it's like it becomes sometimes a whole other beast once those five different ideas all start working together.
Yeah.
Dave, who was our drummer for the self-titled, he was probably the most prolific songwriter of all of us. I mean, he was a really good songwriter. He wrote a lot of stuff that wasn't even squad type stuff. He just wrote and wrote and wrote.
That's awesome, man. So you guys had something kind of interesting that I don't think a lot of other bands can claim. You unfortuitously had a very specific looking album cover for Bombs Over Broadway.
At a very specific time in history.
Specific time, 9/11. Where were you?
Where were you?
When they built that ladder to heaven. South Park, no.
Are those actual? Oh, that's from South Park.
Yeah. And Alan Jackson showed up quickly after you guys made the wrong musical decision and he made all the right ones. Did that seem devastating for you guys in the band? Because I feel like if it were me and I were like teenage Matt going through that, I would be like, my life is over. But did you guys have more of a tempered sort of response to that?
Yeah, it was actually like a really weird thing because, you know, Bombs, we started recording Bombs. It was March 2000, February into March 2000 in Atlanta. And then the album actually came out. I mean, it's a really quick turnaround. I think the album came out like August of 2000.
Yeah.
Did I say 2011? No, 2000. Yeah. So we recorded in March of 2000. The album was out on shelves by August of 2000. So, you know, that's 13 months before 9/11 even happened.
Right.
But there were some like crazy things. Like when 9/11 did happen, we were actually in Little Rock, Arkansas with Barry Pointer, and we were about to start tracking drums on the self-titled album.
Wow.
I woke up to Dave, got a phone call from his girlfriend who lived in New York City. And I just hear his end, of course, but he goes, "What? No way. Are you serious?" And then we all wake up and we're like, "What's going on?" It's like a plane just hit one of the World Trade Center towers. So then we turned on the TV and we saw the second plane hit live.
Wow.
They were on the phone with someone in the Pentagon when that happened and went down. And we were in Arkansas, you know, hours away from home. And just thinking like, gosh, when is it going to stop? Like,
yeah.
And it was just kind of a surreal experience. And I think it was maybe like the next day, maybe not even like the day it happened, but the next day we were back in Barry's house. I think I just had I don't know if it was my dad that called me and asked me about it or if it just came to me on my own, but maybe it was my dad and said, "What are y'all going to do about the album cover?" And I was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. Like, you're right, man. Like, what are we going to do? And then I think we started talking to Tooth and Nail soon after, and the idea was to put a sticker over the cellophane to hide the album cover, so you didn't get that surprise until you took the cellophane.
That's the cheapest fix.
Yes,
of course that would come from the label.
But yeah, and so it is trippy though, man, because to think from its conception that cover was done by a friend of mine who went to art school at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And when he got it all configured up, it was actually that theater that says SCAD on the marquee. Yeah. I mean, it says Squad. It's actually SCAD, right. Savannah College of Art and Design. And he changed it to Squad, and it's falling down in the foreground. Yeah. And then it was like the Savannah skyline behind it. And I said, dude, this is awesome. This is what we want to use.
Yes.
But the song uses New York City as a metaphor. Is there any way you could put like the New York City skyline in the background? And then so he went and did his magic, and he came back with the cover as we know it, which is the Squad marquee falling in the foreground, 3 planes flying towards you, like World War II era bombers flying towards you, and then the 2 twin towers from the Hell's Kitchen perspective in New York. I remember saying to him, he's like, "What do you think about the planes?" I'm like, "I really like the planes because if someone were to bomb you, they would just send a missile. Like, they wouldn't use planes. You don't fly in with planes to bomb people." And then,
oh my gosh,
then you look at the cover a year, 13 months later, and I'm like, they use planes. And then there's like, there's like 3 planes, and 3 planes hit their targets. And now I'm like, we're on the FBI watch list. Sure. There's no way.
And you get on the phone with everyone, and you're like, but guys, I didn't know planes could do that. I've been telling people for years.
There's no way to use planes.
So did you guys get any calls from FBI, CIA?
We didn't, but I always feel like surely someone over there looked into that.
So we had like a few friends that had that album cover, and I remember like after this, it was my first year of high school when 9/11 happened, and I remember our teacher coming and saying, "Guys, the world has just changed. Your lives will never be the same from this day on." And I thought he was being a little bit dramatic. I think that was probably more true for the people that were experiencing that directly. We didn't know anybody in New York. Like, we're just high school kids. We've yet to leave the state with our band, and so our world was pretty small back then. But I do remember going and looking at that album cover, and it gave me chills. Like, it actually kind of scared me a little bit when I was looking at your album cover, and because you're also learning about Nostradamus at that time in high school.
Yeah.
And like actual foreshadowing that happens in life, and it's clearly like a happenstance, right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time.
So crazy. I think, in situations like that, I just remember that the feeling being so weird, just this fact that all this had happened. So, like usually humor is kind of the way people deal with things, or at least the way I deal with things. And so, like, I think one of us said, "Man, we're the real POD." I'm like, "What are you talking about, the real POD?" And they're like, "Prophets of Doom, man. Prophets of Doom." Dude.
Oh.
I've actually, like, literal people have actually asked me, within the church, like, "Did you have visions of it or something?" I'm like, "No, it's just this guy made a really cool looking album cover." And, like, there's no way in my mind at all that could have ever, it's a happenstance. I mean, the world, it's a big world. Crazy things happen sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Everything crazy that will happen on the planet is happening at the SCAD campus right now. It's being arted on the SCAD campus.
It is.
Okay, so you guys were in the process of making your second record with Tooth and Nail with Barry. Had he worked with a lot of bands like you guys before? Or that name sounds really familiar. I feel a little bit ignorant that I don't know.
It's kind of like in later Tooth and Nail history, like Aaron Sprinkle became the guy that worked with all the bands,
right.
Barry was sort of on his way to becoming that guy. I mean, he's based out of Little Rock, Arkansas. It was more or less a home studio, but like a really nice home studio.
Yeah.
And he had worked with, like, he did Living Sacrifices, like Reborn. So I would think that was like the first thing he did for Tooth and Nail.
Yeah.
And then after that, I mean, there was a couple other bands he worked with. Like, he did Juliana Theory's Emotion is Dead.
Right.
He did that album. And we really liked a lot of the sounds on that album. And we liked the energy of that album.
Yeah.
That's what made us think of him. It's just that, like, he can do a lot of different sounds. He works with a lot of different genres. There's an energy to that album that we liked, and maybe he can help us.
To the Juliana Theory album.
Yeah.
Right.
Not even that we were huge Juliana Theory fans, but like that album in general, I remember thinking, man, it sounds really big. It sounds professionally done, but there's still energy to it.
Yeah.
I think that's what was lacking on Bombs. And so I was like, maybe, let's work with him, and he can capture a lot of that raw energy we have live, but also have it sound really awesome, like sound like we didn't record it in. I don't know, there's always like that fine balance between overly produced and then not well produced. And so we wanted to be somewhere in where that sweet spot was in between those two.
Do you feel like you hit it? Do you feel like you got that sweet spot with that record?
That is my favorite album.
We're talking about self-titled right now?
Self-titled, yeah.
Yeah, me too, man. Yeah. I loved that record so much. Like, growing up, period, like from the time of like 13 to 28 now.
Yeah.
I've listened to that record literally every month.
That's awesome. Thanks.
I mean, I think I really like that record. My favorite one, hands down, though, is Late News Breaking, the one that comes after that.
Right.
But actually wanted to ask you about that. It sounds big. It sounds like it came out on Capitol.
Yeah, for sure.
What was that transition like? Was your contract up with you? I have to imagine what do they do? Like 5-6 albums in a contract? Did Capitol have to come buy you out of there, or? That
was some more of like music business insider stuff. It was like, so we did self-titled. It wasn't huge. It didn't sell like a ton of units. We were all really proud of it. Like I said, that's my favorite album. That's the one I could probably sit down and listen to beginning to end and not really skip a track.
Yeah.
Or if I do skip a track, like one track, not a ton. And so when we went to make that album, we'd already had interest from Capitol. Like this guy, Louis Bandak, who was an A&R guy for Capitol. He had come to see us. We spent a month and a half opening up for the Juliana Theory on a nationwide tour. And we played at the Masquerade in West Hollywood. At that time, record companies were after them too, like major labels were after them.
After Juliana?
And so, yeah. That's like they were coming after them, and we were just kind of reaping the benefit of that because we would be in all the spaces the record companies were, because they were there to see them. And we played the Masquerade, and Louis just happened to be in the crowd there to see Juliana, but he fell in love with us. Like he just fell in love with the live thing, and he just I think that I said something like, we said we start with a joke. And so I think my first thing I said before we started, I'm like, we're SquadFive-O, who knows who we are? And people would raise their hand. I'm like, everyone else leave. And then we started our first song. And I guess he thought that was really badass. He's like, oh, when you said that, it was just like, yes. It's like Axl Rose is back.
It's like high school mentality. I was saying it as a joke,
man. I didn't believe it. Yeah. So he gave Chris his card, and Chris is like, when he gave it to me, I didn't even realize that we were in LA, It's like, he gave it to me. It's like, hey, I work for a record company in town, but I'm thinking it's like some independent record company. But then I was like, wait, we're in Los Angeles. And then he looked at the card and it was Capitol Records. And so Chris slid him a copy of Bombs, which was, we hadn't done the self title yet. So he slipped him a copy of Bombs. And, Louis said he listened to it because he actually came. He liked us so much, I guess. He came the next night to San Diego. And so since I knew he was coming to San Diego, I kind of upped the ante a little bit. And we played some weird, I don't even know what it was. It wasn't like a club, I don't feel like. Yeah. But at any rate, they had like rafters in the ceiling. And I started doing the math to like, how can I get up in those rafters?
Of course.
Yeah. And so I found a way to get up in the rafters. And I think I hung upside down like a bat or something and sang a song or part of a song. And I think that put Louis over the top, and he was pretty much in love with our band from that point on. And he was trying to convince his bosses to sign us or to take over our contract from Tooth and Nail. Because at that time, Tooth and Nail and Capitol were under the EMI umbrella. Yeah. Like they were all under that one big umbrella of the EMI group. And
so they had sold like most of the catalog or something to them. I don't know how that deal went, but it
was like I'm not sure how that worked. I just knew that now that since they were under EMI, if Capitol wanted us, it wouldn't have been a really big move.
Right.
Like it would have just been like paperwork. It wouldn't have been like this hostile coming in and taking over or poaching a band from Tooth and Nail, because they're all under the same company. So it's like the same company would still own them or own us. Yeah. And Louis really liked it. And he was actually there when we demoed. I don't know if it was with Aaron or who, but it was in the Tooth and Nail headquarters. And they had a little studio in the basement. And we demoed I Don't Want to Change the World, I Just Want to Change Your Mind. Yeah. And Louis was just like, man, if all the new songs you're writing are like this, then this is going to be amazing. And I guess he took that, and Capitol still didn't want to bite on it. So we had to move forward. So we went ahead and did what ended up being the self-titled with Tooth and Nail. And after we released that, I think Louis working endlessly because he really believed in us. And he also, what was that band called? Yellow Card. Yeah. You remember that band? Mm-hmm. Like he was their A&R guy. That was his first band that he got signed. And they had that hit with Ocean Avenue.
Oh, yeah. So he had a bit of pull.
Yeah. So once that happened, I think when he said he kept pushing us, they finally were like, okay, Ocean Avenue's a hit. He kind of got an eye for bands, and then they brought us in. Yeah, Louis Bandak, great guy. Saw it when we played with Five Iron in Hollywood at the Troubadour again. In October, he came out to our show. It was good to see him.
Oh, that's
awesome.
Cool. You guys get to catch up and pal around.
Yeah, and so great guy, Louis Bandak.
I just imagine him like being like this quintessential like major label A&R guy who's like, guys, I'm telling you,
you gotta be all over the wire.
I saw this band play live. The lead singer was hanging from the rafters. This guy, he's got no fear. This band's gonna be the biggest thing in the world. It's all over the wire.
It was pretty much like that.
Okay. So we would,
without the accent, and he was very soft spoken.
Oh, sorry.
So nothing like
sorry,
that.
Louis. We have fantasies about what you're like.
Louis Bandak, if you hear this, you're a great guy. No, but so like that's how it happened. I mean, he finally convinced them. They did the paperwork with tooth and nail. We moved over to Capitol, and then we went producer shopping. Ended up with Matt Wallace, who he'd done a few things. He'd engineered like a couple Stones live albums, and his big thing was he did that Faith No More album with Epic on it.
Okay,
that was like the first thing he did that like really he made some money off of and could do producing as like a career.
Yeah.
So we were interested in him, and he listened to some of our stuff and said he was interested in us, and Capitol put it all together, and we ended up in Sound City to do Late News
Breaking. I didn't know that you guys
Wow.
recorded that in Sound City. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty rad. I mean, it was just like you could feel the history in the room.
You could probably smell the history too.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. And you just got like platinum albums hanging on all the walls, like Nevermind, and the Johnny Cash American album was hanging on the wall. I mean, it was pretty surreal, man. Like being in there, and the guy that was like he wasn't like the engineer, but he was like the assistant to the engineer. He had just worked on the newest Rancid album, which was at the time was Indestructible, which was pretty cool for us.
Yeah,
because we were big Rancid fans, of course. It's another band we borrowed from.
Wait, when did Out Come the Wolves?
That was like 96.
That was
96 or 98.
96.
I think it was 6. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like Dookie came out in 94, and I think Out Come the Wolves benefited from all that hype.
Yeah, for everybody listening to the podcast who is like, Sound City, what the hell are you talking about? I think Dave Grohl did a really great documentary film on this.
For HBO.
Yeah, for HBO. If you have the opportunity, go check it out, because some of the most formative rock and roll albums of that Davey and I grew up with, or that influenced countless generations, or maybe just 2 or 3 rock and roll fans. It's a really great primer on just how there can be so much musical history in one spot. So anyway, yeah, go check it out. So what was tell me one of your favorite memories from recording Late News Breaking at Sound City?
There were like a lot of kind of like a couple stories. I think there's 2 that I should definitely share, but one was I think it was like our first or second day there. We became aware that the Jacksons, like, Michael Jackson's family.
Who is this?
The Jacksons.
Shut up.
Right. Yeah. I think
they were buying a space in the same complex as Sound City to start their own studio. And we got to meet Jermaine Jackson, which was pretty exciting, and like shake his hand and just be like, wow, your brother was really famous.
He probably gets that all the time. He doesn't leave the house anymore. He's like, let me guess what people are going to say.
He was a really cool guy, because that was kind of surreal. Just be like, hey, oh crap, that's Jermaine Jackson. It's kind of trippy. But the craziest one is this. So when we were recording, we were in the big room at first to kind of do like all the basic tracks.
Right.
And then we moved into the smaller room to do all the overdubs and the vocals and all that stuff. And when we moved out of the big room, Rick Rubin moved into the big room, and he was recording the International Noise Conspiracy. I guess if we're doing it, he signed them to American Records, and he was recording their album. It was just trippy seeing him every day. And he had like a driver that would drive him there in his Bentley. And then the driver would just hang out with us all day. Like, cause when you're recording, if your part's not up, you're kind of just hanging out, right? You're like, and so we were like in the lounge or sitting out front on the patio with the driver, just talking to him, and he like showed us the Bentley and like this door that opened that had a button that shot out a umbrella.
Are you sure it wasn't the Batmobile?
It wasn't the Batmobile. I investigated.
You press a button and an umbrella pops out of it.
Yeah, it was so fancy, man. And then he had these crazy dogs that had these like probably haircuts that cost more than my haircut, and like it just kind of surreal. It was that time while we were in Sound City, Johnny Cash died, and Rick, did his last couple albums, the American albums.
Yeah.
We were sitting in there, and I remember it was like the day after Cash had died, and I was sitting in the lounge. They had like this front lounge, and I was watching TV, and I looked out the door because they kept the door open. The weather was so nice, and I looked out the door of the parking lot, and this guy was walking up to the studio, and I was like, who's this guy trying to be Dave Grohl? And it was freaking Dave Grohl.
What?
Like the guy trying to be Dave Grohl was Dave Grohl, and he was just walking in to talk to Rick Rubin about God knows what, but he was there to visit Rick Rubin.
He's like, where's a great place to get a burrito around here?
I was like, it's freaking Dave Grohl, man. Which, I mean, I'm not like a huge Foo Fighters fan or anything, but it's still just like, it's just funny to see someone and you're like, who's this person trying to be this other person? But it's really the person just trying to be themselves, you know, just trying to be themselves.
We actually are pretty big Foo fans.
Oh yeah.
But I do think you have a really cool story, Jeff, but for a split second, I thought that the story was going to get even cooler and you were going to be like, it was the ghost of Johnny Cash.
Yeah, for sure.
Just walking around the studio.
Johnny.
And he was going to find me and be like, Jeff, do you know I'm dead now? And Jeff was going to be like, yeah, but Rick Rubin's next door. I'll try another one later.
And then Dave Grohl played drums on our album.
Yeah.
That's a lie. That's a lie.
How we're going to remember
Don't cold open with that. That's a lie. No, but I just did think, who's this guy trying to be Dave Grohl? Oh, it's
Grohl. Actually Dave Grohl. How disappointing. It would have been so much cooler to see a poser than you could hate on him.
Of course, we're in California. Of course, it's Dave Grohl. It was a really cool experience overall, man. I mean, like the studio was cool. Matt was cool. We called him Uncle Matty because he was kind of like that your perverted uncle that would always come over and drink too much at the family get-together.
Yes.
Not that I have one, but
I feel bad because I am an uncle now, and I'm an Uncle Matt. But I'm not a weird pervy uncle. I do make records though.
You could be Uncle Matt. You just don't want to ever be Uncle Matty.
Yeah.
As soon as they add the Matty part, that's like, oh, that's Uncle Matty.
Yeah.
But no, he was really cool. Like we loved Matt, and all the guys that worked on that album were a lot of fun. And Capitol put us up for like a week, and not a week. God, we were there like 3 or 4 weeks. But we stayed in like these crazy condominiums where, I don't know, it was just really cool, man. It's like a cool experience. It's like when you see like how the major label does something, and then, you know, because when we did our self-titled with Barry and Little Rock, we stayed in La Quinta.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure, I want to say we all stayed in the same room. So it was all 5 of us in one room. I think Chris was on an air mattress on the floor or something.
I think when we did our first record, we ended up staying at like a Homewood Suites or something in Knoxville. It was pretty fun. And then by the time our second record rolled around, we had put so much of the budget into making that record. We were literally sleeping on friends' couches in Nashville and like driving to, what was it, Dark Horse or something out in Nashville. Yeah. That's awesome. So you guys have this really cool experience doing this record at Sound City. You get to see poser Dave Grohl posing as Dave Grohl. Were you excited about the release of that? Like, were you proud of this record when you were done with it?
Yeah, I think every album you finish, I think at the end of it, you have great hopes for it. Yeah, we were really excited. I mean, it was kind of like, I guess on that album, in order just to get the best songs, what we thought were the best songs on the album, we kind of put egos aside and said, like, we'll just give everyone gets songwriting credit, regardless of who did most of the writing of the song. Everyone's just going to share a fifth of the songwriting credit and therefore share a fifth of the publishing. And that way we could just make sure we get the best songs on there. There's no one vying for their song to be on the album over someone else's song. And so that was like a really cool thing. And so we felt like we had, like, you know, the best collection of songs from those sessions that we put together at that time. And of course, when you're in the process of making it, you just think it's awesome. I mean, we brought in people to kind of come do some cameos, you know, no like huge big names, but like we brought Mike Knott in. I don't know if you guys know who he is.
What a deep dive that name is.
Who is Mike Knott?
Yeah,
that's actually so Mike Knott owned a really small record label way back in the day called Blonde Vinyl. I think he might have signed like Ronnie and Jason Martin's first band, Dance House Children.
Oh,
he did.
Yeah. And then he put out, I think he put out some of his own music on the label too. Jeff, you sound like you probably know a little bit more about it than I would.
Yeah, we, like John and I actually, and Dave too, the drummer. We were all huge Mike Knott fans just from his times, and like he was in Lifesavers and then Lifesavers Underground, which eventually became LSU.
Yeah.
Just this dark, like brooding, I guess, Christian market, because Blonde Vinyl was like a Christian market, like indie label, but like really dark. Like definitely no major labels, like major Christian labels, were going to put out the stuff he was putting out.
It was like almost a little bit Bazan before Bazan.
Yeah, I mean, like one of my favorite songs by LSU is this song called GGG. And like one of the verses is, I want to molest the molester, hang him from a cross above the world. This man is sick and he is a loaded gun, but he was molested when he was young. And it's just like this, like, who the hell is going to put that out? But he did. But it's like this, it's like crazy cryptic verse. And then the chorus is basically, it's called GGG because at the beginning of the chorus, he says, Jesus.
Yeah.
Like that's how the chorus comes in. And the lyrics are, Jesus, give me love. Jesus, give me understanding. So all the verses are about all these sick, messed up people. And then like all the choruses are like, give me understanding.
Yeah.
Give me love. Teach me how to love the unlovable. But yeah, we love Lifesavers, especially they put an album called The Great Prophet, which was like about this guy that was just scamming people for money. He was like a false prophet, but he wrote a whole concept album about it and it was really, really fascinating stuff. But at any rate, we were big fans and we touched base with him and he came in and actually on which song is it on there? So one, gosh, I don't even know our own song titles. It's the one that starts with "This is the man, this is the man," and like it comes in real aggressively. But that's him totally doing all those vocal parts, like the talking parts and the screaming parts, all throughout that song. And then we also brought in Ronnie Martin, who did some sounds and.
He was just mentioned on the last. So the last podcast that we did was actually Eric Melzer from this band called Norway, who I think Ronnie signed to Tooth and Nail when Tooth and Nail picked up his label, like really briefly for like a distro deal or something. Yeah, but we should just get Ronnie to come on the podcast. I don't even know if he would give a shit, but we should get him to come on the podcast and kind of, because he gets mentioned so many times. He's like interwoven into so many people's stories.
Yeah, he's such a cool guy, man. Like he literally is like, there's just certain human beings in the world that like, I just always consider them really, really decent guys.
Really decent.
Yeah. Like Ronnie Martin's at the top of that list.
Awesome.
Like he's the type of guy too, that like, if I ain't seen him in years, I keep up with him on social media. Like, I just feel like if we saw each other, we would hang out just like we had seen each other the day before.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
right.
It would be like it hadn't been 15 years or something. Yeah, he's totally like who he is, you know?
Yeah.
And plus, one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life was at Tom Fest 98 when Joy Electric did the whole Robot Rock thing, man. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So much fun.
Yeah, I was a huge Joy E fan growing up. Actually, I just realized this when we were putting together all the editing for Eric's episode. I was like, I actually sold Ronnie the synthesizer that he used on the very last Joy E album. It's like an old Juno 6 that I had, and I remember being at some Moog show or conference or something, and for some reason we were texting each other. I was like, oh yeah, I've got this thing sitting around, I'm not using it anymore. And he was like, can I buy it off of you? And I was like, yeah, I mean, selling Ronnie Martin a synthesizer is kind of like selling Ronald McDonald a French fry.
Yeah.
You know, like seriously, like who gets the opportunity to do that? But yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. I hope it sounded like he got some cool stuff out of it. You guys put out this last record and your band didn't last too much longer after that last record came out. What happened? Next week on 11 Life, the final days of Jeff's band, SquadFive-O. What caused them to break up, and what do their lives look like now? In the second half of our time with Jeff, we also take a pretty deep dive into what his thoughts are now about God, religion, faith, all the things that make the show really fun. We can't thank you guys enough for spending the last hour and a half of your lives with us. You'll never get it back, and that's why it means a lot that you guys listen. We love y'all, and we will see you next week. Goodbye.